Hi, welcome to Artcasters, episode 153. This is the show where we rock discussions about cartooning, graphic design, about our feelings, about a lot of really cool things. So you should stick around. So anyhow, we do this every week. It alternates between my channel and Scott Circling's channel. Usually we have a rotating third guest chair, and today we have Cory Kerr with us, who you might be familiar with from the 48-hour art check.
And I'm rotating in my chair currently.
Exactly. And we all have, I think we've established this, but we all actually have rotating chairs. It's like a must. Yes. I don't know if you saw that, but that was like some full 3D VR experience that Scott was just showing you.
Got too many cords attached to go that far. I'll like pull stuff off my desk.
No, that's totally true. If you spin too far, it's like a suicide mission at that point. Yeah, so usually we start off the show just kind of introducing everybody. I'm sure if you guys have been following along, you're familiar with Cory and all of us, but in case you aren't, this is my channel, so I'd assume you know who I am, and if you haven't, you'll have hit subscribe by the time I'm done with this, and hit that little bell. And then you can find my stuff at quarterlystories.com. And then Scott, where can people find your work, sir?
You can find my work at Serkworks.com, SERKWORKS, and I've added a couple new additions to my website. My new website, I've added a digital store. It's under download, so if you're interested in like my character builder packs, they're a lot cheaper than you can find them on like Creative Market. So I got those up there, and there'll be more coming to that store. And then also I put up a vlog, and that's under the news tab. So and on YouTube, Surfworks on YouTube.
Sweet. Yeah, that new redesign is really cool, and will actually it integrates a lot of what we're going to be discussing today. So just go check it out. And those builder packs are awesome too. Like if you want to make a zombie or cool stuff, like seriously check those things out. They're insanely awesome, and they are too cheap. So you guys should get them while they're still too cheap, because Scott.
I'm not going to argue with all the work. Some people might think but I mean, they're kind of pricey, but with the amount of work that went into them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you are getting value for your dollar. Like, Scott is very attentive to the details on these things and what you can accomplish with them. There's a couple of YouTube videos he's done, but anyhow, I think I've said enough. Just check them out, and they speak for themselves. Cory, where can we find your work, sir?
You can find my stuff at corykerr.com, CORYKERR.com. And I haven't updated most of the site in a while, unlike Scott, but there is some new sections that we'll talk about tonight that I'm kind of excited about. And then I'm also on YouTube. You can just Google my name, and there's lots of stuff on there as well. I'm doing some stuff on Instagram right now, which is kind of fun, which I will be inking tonight. So, yeah.
Nice. And I encourage everybody to check that out as well. Cory's always up to awesomeness. Okay, so today for the topic, we were thinking about kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit. And this is going to be, in a weird way, kind of like a spitballing session for thoughts on our own channels and thoughts on kind of social marketing in general. Social media marketing, not social marketing. We're not going into large groups of people and going, look at my stuff. But anyhow, so social media marketing, which, as all of us are professional illustrators and cartoonists and designers, and a huge element of that, like most of our viewership, like if you guys are watching this all the time, most of you guys are having to attack this problem every day. Like, how do I effectively market myself using social media? What, avenue am I going to use? A lot of why we wanted to have Cory on is because Cory, this kind of dovetails a little bit from our last episode, where we were talking about kind of, like large conventions and and meetups and stuff for designers, and how you can kind of get a lot of information from that. And Cory just got back from Vid Summit, which Cory, actually, like, I was going to describe it, but I think you'd probably actually explain it better. So do you want to give people like a rough idea of what Vid Summit is, what kind of stuff they go over?
Yeah, so Vid Summit is, it's like VidCon, except instead of being a place where a bunch of fans meet like famous YouTube people, it's more the people that are making the videos are meeting like the engineers who are like, you know, figuring out the algorithm and doing stuff. And so it's more for the people that are creating videos. And so it was live streaming, podcasting, YouTube kind of audience. And there were people there that from every different niche. There were people there representing like different podcasting services. There were two different companies, TubeBuddy and vidIQ, vidIQ, that are kind of browser extensions that will give you data on YouTube. And one of the interesting things about those guys is that they gather a ton of aggregate data and give that data away for free as a way of like selling their products. And so they're able to like speak to a large amount of like what is going on YouTube. And so, yeah, so it was mainly like a professional, it was more of a professional thing than like VidCon.
Got it.
Yeah, and so that's basically what it was. It was pretty interesting.
And it seems a little more intimate too than VidCon, right? Because it's more about like the nuts and bolts and a little like a little more one-on-one.
Right. It was way more B2B training than it was like celebrity, and so the audience is significantly smaller. And more intimate. And so like I was able to email the presenters afterwards and have conversations with them, and they were very open to that because, you know, there were maybe a couple thousand people there rather than tens of thousands.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really eye-opening on a lot of things. A lot of it was just, you know, a reminder of things that I already knew that I should be doing. But quite a bit of it was stuff that I was unaware of.
Yeah, and I think you know, this ties in kind of with last week too. But if there's one takeaway from going to these like conferences that I've received, it seems to be that you know, it never hurts to kind of brush up on stuff, and sometimes you're just it's almost like hearing the obvious. Or maybe like even stuff you knew you had to do, or in some cases, in great cases, it's like completely new information. Either way, it can be really valuable to like kind of be that nice little extra push to be like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to be doing that. Or that extra push of just kind of like inspiration and fire to kind of get you motivated to do it. And then like, yeah, there's also those beautiful moments of like, you know, gaining new ideas and stuff. And it seems like that, to me, it seems like that would be like, I think if you have any other goal going to a conference than just to kind of come out with some new ideas of like how to approach things, or maybe even old ideas that you just kind of forgot about, I wouldn't go. But if you're wanting to kind of up your game a little bit, I think those things seem like really valuable experiences, you know?
Yeah, and they're pricey, but a lot of times, and this is something that's super interesting to me that I don't think a lot of people take advantage of. If you are working for a company, it's in your company's best interest to send you to stuff like this. And some of these, like Adobe Max and others, will actually give you like the pitch that you need to do with your bosses. But if you're, you know, if you are an employee and you are doing, you know, something that is related to what the conference is about, the conference can only help your business. And so it makes sense. You know, some of these conferences cost, you know, like I think Vid Summit was like $800. And it's not like I have $800 lying around. but some of them are up in the like $3,000-4,000, in different marketing conferences and stuff. And just like other professionals like doctors and lawyers and chiropractors and whatever, like they're like mandated and required to keep up professionally on things. Even in the creative fields, doing that is not an uncommon practice. And so if you guys want to go to stuff like this, like go find conferences that make sense for what it is that you're doing, and then pitch it to your boss, because to them, they can hire somebody who knows that stuff, which will cost them, $30,000 to $100,000 a year. Or they can spend $2,000-3,000 sending you to one, and then that, and they already have hired you. And so there's a lot of benefit to businesses, and so it's great all the way around, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to me that the way I ended up getting convinced to do one of them was from an educator, like a friend of mine who's a teacher, who like no question, they do that every year, or every other year minimum, just so like, teachers go to conferences, it's kind of part of their job. But it was really enlightening to me to realize, like, I just did the math of what you were talking about, where I was like, oh, that's actually it. I can honestly say it's going to benefit, my employer. I think if you're in a scenario where it's like you want to go to like San Diego Comic-Con and you can't think of a way that it's going to benefit your employer, then maybe in that case, be honest and like, fork out the cash and cover it yourself. But if it's something where you can honestly like look at it and be like, I might get like 10% value added to my work life from this.
Yeah.
That's 10% more productivity. So it might seem really minuscule, but dude, 10% more productivity over, 40 hours a week for a year, that's going to pay back in dividends, So
yeah,
it's like that. And, that's how you pitch those things too. But yeah, so that's so cool. So Scott, like, what do you want to know about Vid Summit? Because like this, I kind of want you guys to lead, because I don't want to cop out and say I'm totally new to YouTube, because I've been doing, Artcasters and the Art Check and then my own vlog for a while now, but I don't think I'm as active or as good at YouTube as you guys are. And so I kind of want to glean from it. So like, is there anything you want to know, Scott, like from VidCon, like right out the gate?
I watch a lot of videos on this kind of thing, so I try to educate myself. So I don't know. Cory said there's a lot of that stuff that he kind of already knew that he wasn't implementing. So I try to do all this, and I would assume it helps. Like I always like use as many tags and everything as I can. I the descriptions and all, I could probably improve a little in the descriptions, but as far as thumbnails, I try to make great thumbnails as much as I can and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully all that little stuff helps. But then you see people with big audiences who don't, they don't have any tags, they don't have anything or anything, and they're doing awesome. Now that doesn't mean that I shouldn't, because they're in a position where maybe they don't need to do that, but I need that kind of leg up. So I'm just curious. Yeah, go ahead, Cory.
Well, I was just going to say, and part of it is that an audience begets an audience. And so, because the game has changed. And so if you came into YouTube 7 years ago, you could have a huge audience and not do any of the things that, you should be doing or whatever. And it's because you have a huge audience. And so, it's different now if you're trying to grow. If you're trying to grow an audience now versus growing an audience several years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where like you could see people that are doing stuff and you're like, well, they're not doing all the things that, they should be, quote unquote, or whatever. But I think that's why.
Yeah. And I think that probably would apply to any field, like there's a lot of advice I could give, like people for getting into illustration or graphic design or art direction or whatever, but like half, if not even more than half of like what I did to enter might have changed, because it it does vary per person. Like there's always a different entry point and there's a different trick. And so I think a lot of these things you kind of take with a grain of salt. And like I was saying, kind of going to like these conventions is kind of the same thing where it's like you're going to hear a lot of stuff that's like may sound great and it might end up being ultimately useless. But even if you come out with like 10% or just reinvigoration or like some inspiration, I think that's kind of the purpose. So I would think with this, it's like, hey, these things might not work, but there's some stuff that, to consider. There was some cool stuff. Like actually, Scott,
I was just going to say it can't hurt though. That's what we should. It can't hurt. It's not. So
yeah, so I guess a good way to preface it would be if you have like a YouTube channel that has like 200,000 subscribers, like maybe please come on and be a guest and tell us your tricks.
We haven't talked to Holly in a while. Maybe we can get her on.
Yeah, that's not a bad call. But like for us, like these are things that were really interesting. So like on the thumbnail front, like Cory, like Scott, you were saying make engaging thumbnails, but like the weird thing is like VidCon or Vid Summit, it sounds like they got like really like weird and kind of crazy awesome into like the science of.
Oh yeah.
So you want to get like dip into that a little bit because
so there's people who have analyzed thousands and thousands and thousands of videos and tracked their success rate based on a number of factors. One is engagement, the other is views, and then another one is shares. And so there's a lot of different things because you can track a video beyond YouTube, and then you can track it on YouTube, and you can also see what is going on. And so anyway, if you're looking at like performance, there's a slide here, and I have this deck, so I'll be referring to it, but I didn't get permission. It's not my proprietary presentation, and so I don't have permission to show it on the screen. Got it. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you measure performance, then there's like two big things there's three big things in thumbnails that will cause, and it's like these are kind of like no duh moments, but then like having heard it, now I see it everywhere. It's kind of like you buy a specific type of car and then all of a sudden you see that car all over the place.
Yeah.
It's like, those cars have always been there. You're just now aware of it. But one is the faces. And so if you have no faces, then your video will underperform significantly. And if you have one or several small faces where, it's like a waist up shot or a full body shot, but the face is not significant or prominent, then it'll do well, but not as well as just a giant face, like a huge face that fills up, like 75% of the height of the thumbnail. And then they go into the number of faces, and one face is okay, but 2 and 3 faces together, that's like the sweet spot where you have 2 or 3 faces. And if you guys have ever seen like Philip DeFranco's show, he does kind of like a pop culture news type show. His thumbnails are always like him like making some sort of expression, and then 2 of the people that he's talking about. And so like I would say like 95% of the surface area of his thumbnail are giant faces. And so that's one. And then they also went into, they tracked what people respond to from like a psychological level, and people respond to emotion, whether it's good or bad emotion, people respond to emotion. And so if that face is emoting, almost overacting, then it will perform better than like a bland facial expression. And so you'll notice that it's kind of a little experiment, but Josh and I on the 48-hour art check have been playing with this. And so and it's actually kind of fun. I thought at first that it would be a little demeaning, but I'm really enjoying it because you just get to act like a dork. and the thumbnails are way better. And so what we'll do is at the beginning of the end of each show, we'll just take like 5 or 6 seconds of video of us making stupid faces at each other, and then I screenshot that and incorporate it into the thumbnail. And
That's
so
awesome.
it's the number of faces, the size of the face, and the emotion of the face. And so like a lot of people will claim like looking at the camera helps or whatever, but really it's just like whether or not you're showing emotion. Then the other thing on the thumbnails that's really interesting that you can do is Google has and if you don't know, Google owns YouTube, but Google has a thing called Cloud Vision, and you can go to Cloud Vision right now and put an image in there. And this might be an interesting thing to do. I should share my screen and do this in a minute, but it will analyze it and it will tell you what's in it. And so as it's analyzing it, it also rates a certain number of criteria. And one of the criteria is racy. And if it is likely racy, because they have kind of a scale and it tells you like how sure it is that this is happening. And so if it's like a high percentage of surety that it is very racy, you can bet that your content will not trigger the algorithm and be promoted on YouTube. And there's other factors like violence, nudity, and other things that will drastically negatively impact the performance of your video. And they can do that not only with still images, but they can do that with the videos themselves. And they gave several examples of that as well. Then another thing beyond faces is the amount of text. And if you limit the amount of text, then it significantly performs. And so they actually broke it down into character counts. 0 characters outperforms everything. And then there's kind of a dip from like 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. And then it spikes again almost as high as 0 at like 16 to 20 and 21 to 25. And then it falls off. And so if you're going to have text, 1 or 2 words max, and try to keep it under 20 characters, and that will significantly perform. And then the last thing that they did is, and this will make sense to designers and colorists, but is a contrast ratio. And so if your contrast ratio is high, then it will perform better. And so they're doing things like on the faces, they'll knock out the background, and then they'll put like a glowing white around him, or they'll light it in such a way that you get a lot of depth in the face or whatever. And so that was kind of like what I gathered for thumbnails. And there were actually quite a few speakers that spoke about thumbnails. Thumbnails seem to be one of the most important things. The most important thing that you can do on YouTube to get views and to retain viewership is to win the box on the right side. So you've got the kind of like suggested views. If you can win as many of those as possible, and stay on brand, like, you know, Illotalk, my YouTube channel is branded with black and yellow, and I have a specific font that I use, and things like that. And so if people see those thumbnails, my hope is that they recognize, oh, this is another thumbnail from the same creator, and they whatever. And so,
yeah. Hey, Cory, can I interject real quick?
Yeah,
I got a question. So I don't know if you've seen my thumbnails on the very left-hand side. There's a real thin bar that says Art Lab just running down the side.
Yeah.
So I started doing that because I noticed that there's a YouTube channel called I think it's called Video Creators. I forgot the name of the guy who does it, but he talks about all this kind of stuff. He was probably there, I'm assuming. But
what's his name?
That's what I'm trying to remember. I forgot his name. I haven't watched his stuff in a little while, but I think it's just called Video Creators, and he's, you know, but because he had something similar to that, but then I noticed that he stopped doing that. So I don't know if there was a reason that he stopped doing that, because to me it kind of makes sense, like you said, because it's branding and it doesn't take up a lot of space. But I was just curious if you heard anything about that when they were talking about thumbnails, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I'm just curious why he would have stopped doing it. And you even like the big giant YouTubers and stuff, you don't even like, say, a Philip DeFranco. I mean, you can definitely tell it's branded because it's always him and, like you said, the two other people. But I don't see a lot of that, like a logo or just something that kind of brands it to your particular channel.
They didn't get super specific on that in the presentations that I went to, and so I'm not sure. But they just did character count is what they're talking about, and so I don't know if a logo counts on character count or not. But my guess is that it does, because what's happening is that people will, they make a choice really quickly, and there's lots of data on this, but they'll choose very quickly, and part of that is that if they take time to read things, it'll often kind of delay that choice or divert that choice, and so I would imagine that even like little logos and things like that kind of play into it. But I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know.
So I wonder if I'm a strange individual, because like at this point, like I love new information and this is so fascinating, but it's like there's a point where my brain just starts feeling overloaded, and we've barely even dipped into the stuff you've talked about at Vid Summit. But I'm like, I'm at this point just even trying to digest, and I've already heard this from you before, So it's like to me, I think it's just like, I think this is going to be a fun topic because it's just crazy amounts of content. And I think if you even apply like 10% of what Cory was just saying, just as an experiment, it can also just make things fun. Like we've been having a lot of fun with those like weird photos. I think it's hilarious. I'm always for that kind of thing anyway, because I just think like, I don't know, making something fun isn't a bad move. And so like, but man, I mean, what a crazy amount of stuff. And like, I hadn't heard any of that stuff, but I don't follow it as tightly. So I find it really fascinating. I don't know. Is there stuff, Scott, that like you've kind of gleaned from those channels about thumbnails that we kind of missed?
A thumbnail specifically? No, just kind of what Cory talked about, and just more or less just have it look good, have it something that's going to attract people. Like sometimes I listen, again, I watch a lot of videos on this kind of thing, and sometimes I'll look at people's thumbnails, like big YouTubers, and I'll think, well, I'm thinking like, because I think in terms of graphic design, if I'm trying to market to somebody, I want the design to look good. But a lot of YouTubers, they'll just have a photograph. But then when you really look at that photograph, it speaks a lot, even without any kind of graphic design or anything else. It gets clicks because it's like it either begs to be noticed, or there's some mystery involved, like, oh, what's that? What's going on here? That type of thing. So you don't even, like Cory said, text, minimal text. I always put text. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. If I have to put a lot of text, I'll try to break it up with graphic design. But again, you can put all that in your headline. And so lately I'm just trying to keep that to a minimum. And I'm thinking I want to, now that I'm rebranding and everything, I want to try to keep everything sort of on brand, because sometimes I'll use different fonts and everything, but maybe if I use the same fonts, that might be something that I should start doing. So as far as thumbnails, I think just make them attractive, make them something that somebody's going to want to learn more about. And I'm even thinking about with like the Artcasters, because I like our thumbnails because I like the graphic layout and everything, but I'm wondering if it's, and if you've seen one, you kind of can tell, and I try to change out the colors. So, because one of the things, and I know you've done this before, and I've seen other people do this, where the thumbnail is almost exactly the same on every single one, and it's confusing. That gets really confusing. So I try to change the colors, but I'm wondering if maybe we need to do something else.
One thing about the Artcasters thumbnails is that the contrast ratio is pretty low. Because we're washing it out with one solid color, it lowers the contrast ratio. So so that would be one change that you could do is maybe a different blending mode or something.
Okay.
Because I think that would increase the contrast ratio.
Yeah, yeah. Or, you know, a lot of times it's kind of like I don't want to move away from it, but it would probably help. But a lot of times when people have like a show where they'll have a guest on, they'll feature maybe the artwork of that particular guest. I don't know if that would help, or like when we first did the Artcasters, we had larger pictures of, back then it was Kevin Cross, Jeff Lafferty, and myself, and we had larger pictures. And back then we didn't have guests on the show; it was just us three.
Well, and if we're trying to make the thumbnails more attractive, what we should do is just like have a zoomed in like thumbnail of my beard. And that's it. Just the beard itself. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think that it might be worth visiting. The only thing that kind of kills me about that is just from a design standpoint, I really love the kind of, I don't know, it's got like a stacks kind of feel to it. And I like that. It feels like a record collection. But
yeah, I designed it a lot for like a Blue Note Records type thing.
For sure. And I just like, I don't know, I do
but
like.
Not everyone's. I don't know if not everyone's a designer. Not everyone. So I don't know. I mean, we'll probably get into this a little more. But if we do, should we kind of break this story that what we're thinking about maybe doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
As far as maybe doing this as a podcast, because a lot of times when we invite a guest, they'll say, "Oh, you know," they'll mention the show as a podcast, or even we do that, or we've done that before. I tried to get away from that because we're not really a podcast, but if we do this as a podcast, I mean, there's a lot of other things that we'll have to take into consideration. That might be a good time to try to figure out how to rebrand, because maybe what works on YouTube doesn't work as well as on iTunes. And
yeah, I agree. I think it's time to jump into that, because like that I'm like super wanting to talk about. And honestly, I feel like if we go down the rabbit hole of like everything from Vid Summit, like we're going to end up here for till like 5 in the morning.
Could I mention one other thing before we get into that? Because I think once we get onto that, it's probably going to take us, it might take us to the end of the episode. So another thing, I was just watching a video Roberto Blake put out. I mean, he's just a wealth of information on all this kind of stuff.
He was at Vid Summit.
Okay. Did you see his panel or?
Yeah, he was great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But so one of the things he did a video on, you know, what new YouTubers or smaller YouTubers can do. And the one thing he said, and advice he gave to some other channels was, and one thing that he says is that variety channels just it doesn't work that well anymore. But he's sort of a variety channel himself. And he talked about, he had some advice for another guy that he was consulting or whatever with, and he told him, you know, this one thing that you do, you know, if you just concentrate on that and just do that, then you'll start to see more views. And so the guy did it, and sure enough, that happened. But he also said, but there's a danger in that, because if you do that, you could get burnt out, because you're just doing that one thing, and a lot of people get burnt out. So it's almost like he was giving advice that he's not maybe necessarily taking himself. And I'm kind of in that camp too, because I know, and it's the same thing with comic conventions. I know if I just went there, like if you look at like Will Terry's Comic-Con setup, he does one thing, and it's easy to digest, and he's doing really good. If I went there and just sold one particular thing, you know, I would probably sell a lot more, but is that really what I want to do? And it's the same thing with YouTube. I mean, does the Artcasters every other episode or two, does that kind of break up? Does it get confusing? And I'm talking about doing some other shows that I want to do. And I've mentioned that at the beginning of the year, some other projects and everything. But I like the idea of sort of a variety channel, and hopefully building it around just hopefully me as if I can be so bold to say, a personality. But I don't know. But I still think if I just concentrated on one thing, it would probably do really well, because there's a lot of channels that I watch where that's what they do, and I can tell you right away, like I got into this one guy. He does this thing called comic tropes, and every episode is just a different trope in comics, and he tries to pick out these different tropes. But that's kind of, well, I was going to say that's all he does, but now I'm noticing he's doing some Inktober stuff. But so that might not be a good example. But in the beginning, that's kind of all he did, and it was easy for me to subscribe because I knew exactly what I was going to get and everything. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like that weird crossroads. Like, what do you do? Do I continue to like I have certain videos that are more successful than other ones, but like if I was to talk to, say, Roberto Blake, he may look at my biggest videos, which are like the art hack videos, and he may say, do just this. But there's no way I could do just that because there aren't enough. I can't come up with that many art hacks to do a whole channel on it. I mean, I gave away most of my good stuff, and even with other people chiming in, giving me their ideas, there's just no way I can build a channel off of that. Nor would I want to. So
you could, but it would be you would have to sacrifice a lot, because I've been thinking about the same thing often, because and this was another talk, is like doubling down, right? It's as soon as you hit, double down. And so they say, like, if you see a video that starts performing, double down on that video and make several more videos like that, one after the other, and continue to do that until it stops performing. And personally, and maybe this is, it's not wrong, but it depends on your goals. For me, and my channel, if I really wanted to do well on YouTube and that was my only goal on YouTube, I would only make software videos for Illustrator and Photoshop. Those videos outperform everything else I do ridiculously by tens of thousands of views. And if that was my goal, was to have my YouTube channel, be an income, or, whatever, kind of goal that you get from views and whatever, celebrity and whatever else, then that's what I would do. But that's not my goal. And so I hesitate to do that. But I've had the same struggle, Scott, because I'll do a video that I really care about and I think is good, and it'll get 30 views. I'll slap together something that talks about some simple tool in Illustrator, almost spend no time on the video, maybe an hour, and it gets like 30,000 views. And I'm like, but I don't want to spend my time teaching people Illustrator because that's what I do at work.
Yeah. So this touches on something that I think we all kind of have in common, which is, like, I don't think any of us are the type of people that if we were to start a band would be like, okay, this is the formula for a hit song. We're going to follow this formula. We're going to get a record deal
right now. Yeah.
And then we're going to, auto-tune our voices, and we're going to sample this thing. We're going to follow this formula. We're going to all wear different outfits. I got to wear these shoes because these shoes test well. You know what I mean? I just kind of feel like if you start getting into there, and don't get me wrong, like, I don't know if that's wrong, if that's like your goal, but to me, I feel like I'd just be trapped in a whole world of kind of hell there.
Well, Weird Al had that problem. I remember in the 90s, he like cut off all his hair and got contact lenses and everything. And I remember watching an interview. He said, I got LASIK, and I haven't needed to wear glasses for several years. And I started to feel like I was wearing a Weird Al costume. Like I would go to concert and people would expect like the stupid hair and the glasses and all that stuff. And like, it felt really disingenuous to wear the Weird Al costume, since Weird Al is actually a person and I am him. And so he changed it all up. Since then he's gone back to it. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If your goal is to be, a famous whatever, then go do that thing. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But my goal is different. My goal is not that. And probably because of that, I'm making some sacrifices in viewership and numbers and stuff. But ultimately I'm getting more out of what I want by meeting the type of people that I want to meet and attracting the type of people that are actually interested in the messages that I have and things like that, versus just playing the game. Because I could just go make, I could just, I mean, I've been invited by Adobe to do that type of thing. And I'm just like, just don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to become something that I'm just like dreading. I enjoy making these long, rambly videos about stuff that is so niche that most people are like, why are you talking about this? It's just fun to talk about. And so part of it is that I just enjoy it.
Well, and it seems like the Art Check and Artcasters kind of seem to have this thread in common too, where it's like it serves a few functions. I mean, there's definitely one which is like, I love the community we have kind of building around this, and even if it's a small community, it's like the best community. Like I love these people; they're great people. I follow what they're all doing. We all kind of support each other, and I don't know. It's fun to have that. And aside from that, it's like I really enjoy like doing this every week. Like I actually really like talking to like Scott. I like talking to guests. I like talking to you, Cory. It's like, so it functions on multiple levels because it's like an excuse to hang out with some art buddies, and talk shop, and geek out. And then it's also making content, which to me, it's like we're all makers. So that's helpful too.
Right.
And then it's a cool community that's kind of building around it because organically, because of the fact that I think we're not doing a lot of that stuff and if we choose to do stuff like that, we're going to do it in an authentic way. And I think that in itself, like if any of this stuff were to take off, or Scott, like when your channel started growing a lot more significantly, I'm sure you feel way more comfortable with your channel at the size it's at now than if like 5 years ago you had just like started recycling the same gimmick over and over again and your channel just instantly grew to where it was now. I think you'd feel trapped. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but now I might be wrong, and maybe like people who've done it are just laughing their way to the bank. I don't know.
Some of them are. Some of them are. But I'll tell you a real quick story because I know that this is just a fast divergent topic, but really fast. There were two different presenters that had their kids in their videos, and I'm not going to say who one of them is because of what I'm about to say about them. But she was kind of like one of those family vloggers, and each of her kid had their own channel, and one of their children, and this just blows me away, just one of his channels, because he had two actually, made $30,000 a month in ad revenue. And so that's crazy, right? Which is great. Congratulations. They netted about $3 million gross in ad revenue every year off of the 6 YouTube channels that they had. And then that begs the question, anybody who's a parent is like, okay, well, that's interesting because, your children become either your product or your employee, depending on how you look at it. And so both of them, and the other channel is What's Inside. And that's just where this guy and his son cut things open and see what's inside of it. Yeah. And they've done huge brand deals. Like Lexus approached them and was like, hey, I want to give you a huge chunk of money to like look at our seats. Would you be interested in doing that? They're like, sure, or whatever. They were both asked this question, like, what do you do, given that your children, are still children and human beings, and what happens when they don't want to do a video, or what happens when their mental health is at stake based on the fame and the fortune and like basically selling their personalities to the public. And his answer, the What's Inside guy, was, oh, absolutely, family comes first. I will, I don't care about this YouTube channel, it's great, but I care about my son, and if this YouTube channel ever becomes a problem, or whatever, he doesn't want to make a video, we don't make a video. It's not that big of a deal, and he went on and on about some of the rules that they follow to kind of ensure that. It was great, and it felt really authentic, and it was good. Her answer was, well, I grew up on a farm, and you had to go to work whether you wanted to go to work or not. And they're part of the family income, just like I milked the cows. They've got to make a video whether they feel like it or not. And the room was like palpably uncomfortable with that, because that is just weird, right? And so there's a level of authenticity that kind of comes into play that some people are willing to sacrifice, even with their own children, that I find massively uncomfortable.
It's really weird, especially if you don't live near LA. If you live near LA, you know that type, because there's a lot of kid actors and there's a lot of really weird parents profiting off of their children who are going to have psychological issues when they're older. But yeah, that is really interesting, because there's also like some people who like their kids just really love acting and they support it, you know, so it's like this weird thing. But I think the difference is like one person hands over the keys to the account when the person comes of age. Oh man, wow. Anyhow,
so so anyway, so there's a whole lot of thing on that, but I don't know, Scott. I go back to what you were talking about, and I've had the same struggle, and I don't know if you and I have come to the same conclusion, but very similar conclusions, that just like, for me, what I want out of YouTube is I would love it if hundreds of thousands of people watch my content, but I want it to be the content that I want to make, rather than try to trace the trends and follow the masses. I mean, I'm currently drawing fan art as a joke, you know. So like, that's kind of how I feel about my YouTube channel too. If I'm going to chase a trend, I'm going to do it sarcastically.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, do we want to jump back into what we were talking about as far as the Artcasters? All right.
Yeah. So, and this came about as one of the presenters was saying, "Hey, listen, you know, podcasting is having a resurgence. It actually fell away for a while. You know, it was really big in like 2004 is when it kind of started, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it fell away. But it's actually coming back, and it will continue to get bigger as Alexa and Google Home kind of figure things out. Spotify is in the game now. I mean, the guy polled the audience. Sorry, my Alexa is now talking to me because I said her name.
Contact matching. I'm sorry.
Shut up.
Stop it, Alexa.
We have to stop saying her name or she'll continue talking.
Oh, man, you've just opened a can of worms, Cory.
But anyway, that was really weird, because all of a sudden I heard a woman's voice and it wasn't my wife. And I was like, who is here? But anyway, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, he said that there are 500 million active YouTube channels on YouTube, right? And then there are also 500,000 active podcasts that are out there. But the average person that listens to podcasts subscribes to and listens to 7 different podcasts. And so it's an interesting statistic, because it's easier to listen to a podcast than it is to watch a YouTube video. Your engagement level from a psychological standpoint and from an activity standpoint is a lot lower. You know, there's very few channels like what most of the people in this community are producing, which are, you know, channels that you can turn on and listen to while you work. But that is literally the definition of a podcast. And so what he was saying is, keep making the content that you're making. But if you do some minor formatting changes, that content can also serve as a podcast, and you will reach a completely different and significantly larger audience.
So I want to kind of chime in just a little bit, because so Cory was kind of telling me this, and it's been this thing in my subconscious while doing Artcasters, actually, and then when we started the Art Check, the same thing, and I just for some reason didn't mention it, which is kind of dumb. But like, so Kevin Cross and I used to do a podcast like back in that time when it was just all new. It was like the Wild West, and you know, we didn't even know what it was. We kind of did it through this thing called TalkShoe, which would host it. And we were literally just doing it from like Kevin's studio in downtown Portland because we met at a convention and we were like, well, we want to meet up and talk about illustration with people because nobody, like, we don't know a lot of freelancers. We work these weird hours so we can hang out, get work done, record some content for people who are just starting out and talk about stuff they never talk about in school. Because we both were like really frustrated about the lack of like communication about the realities of the business in art schools, and which I think they've gotten a little better since then. But anyhow, the point being, so we just started this thing out and it just quickly grew to kind of have a pretty big following to where like we were outranking NPR on like design podcasts. But part of that was because when we started, there was like no illustration podcasts. There were like 2 design podcasts. So as those podcasts grew, it's like we grew this massive audience, and it was weird. We kept like hitting the top 10 in iTunes for design podcasts, and we just grew this kind of weird, like loyal, awesome fan base, you know, to the point where we could have like a convention and just mention it like a week before, upload that, and people would show up to the convention we were boothing at and talk about like the episode that we had done like prior to the convention. It was really weird, like a little line of like a little tiny army, you know. And so I knew podcasts were effective in the sense of just like growing a community. The problem Kevin and I always had was like we didn't know how to commoditize it, you know. We didn't really know how to like get sponsors. We didn't like know whether like what do you do with like art companies. You like email them and say like, hey, we've got this podcast, that because like nobody had heard of podcasts, and then the thing kind of fizzled out. But it's like because I'd seen that engagement and experienced that community that can be grown through a podcast, and I still listen to podcasts like because I commute. But as you guys know, if you've followed this at all, it's like I commute a long commute to get to my work, and so I'll listen to like 2 podcasts like on my way to work or an audiobook, and so I know there's like massive audiences still going, and they can kind of like generate more income because of Patreon, which didn't exist at the time, and people feel a lot more comfortable being a patron on Patreon than just like PayPaling you some money, you know. And so it just seemed like a no-brainer when Cory brought this up, and not for like monetary reasons, but just for the fact that like that's an easier way to kind of like reach a really large audience and have people like really have their attention. Because like if you think about it just as a consumer yourself, especially if you commute to a job, it's like what's easier to do on your commute? Watch a YouTube video, kill all that streaming, you know, because that's going to cut out of your pay on like what you're paying for your phone. Your data is just going to suck out of your phone really quick, or you just, you know, like have a bunch of podcasts on a streaming service, and it like takes way less data, and you don't also run the risk of getting in a crash, right? So
yeah, well, and you can download podcasts on Wi-Fi before you leave.
Yeah, you preload them, and you know you got your content for the day, and it's just like it's a no-brainer. So like when Cory brought that up, I was like, dude, we totally should. Like, let's do it, you know, because that's it. I don't know. I love podcasts, and I think audio content's great. So anyhow, so Cory, you can continue. But I was just saying, like when you brought that up, it just like clicked with like this weird like. You know, it's like you were talking about at the Vid Summit, where you were talking about kind of the experience of hearing a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, I knew that, you know,
right.
That was one of those ones where I'm like, why haven't I talked about that? Like I should have been advocating for that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyhow, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting thing. And I think Artcasters, well, and here's another thing I'll give you real quick. I'm talking way too much, but I'll give you some interesting stats. Over 15% of the videos uploaded to YouTube are between 0 and 3 minutes, and over 23% are 3 to 6 minutes. right? And then it drops off quite a bit. It's like just like 5 or 6% are like 15 to 18 minutes. But then if you look at the performance of videos, the videos that are performing are 12 to 15 minutes. Those videos outperform other videos like 300%. And so people want longer content, but it's not being delivered. And then you get into the problem of watch time. Like people will bounce. Most people will bounce within a minute. And so getting your watch time up over 6 minutes is where the YouTube algorithm is triggered. So your stuff will begin to perform really well once you get an average view time of 6 minutes. I'm at like 3.5 minutes right now. But the opposite of that is true with podcasting, where people are getting 20 to 30 minute videos or longer, and people are listening to 85% of the episode to 100% of the episode, and your average listen time is like over 20 minutes. And so podcasting has a greater passive engagement because people are going to do it like while they're mowing the lawn or while they're working out on the treadmill or whatever. And so it's an easier thing, and it's also a little bit more intimate in that you're like, and this sounds really weird, in someone's ear, right? Instead of like on the television or the computer, you are in their ear. And so this guy was talking about this moment where somebody's like listening and surfing and trying to decide what to listen to, and then they have this moment of, yep, this is the one I want to listen to, and they stick their phone in their back pocket. They're very, very unlikely to change that episode after they put the phone away. They're in, right? They're in at that point in time. And so I actually think like Artcasters and 48-hour Art Check and everything, I think those would make for phenomenal podcasts, because we've always said that the way that people view this is podcast-like. I mean, they're viewing it as if it was a podcast. They'll draw or whatever. The cool thing about it, and I think the opportunity that we have for both of those channels, is that we can do a live show and get audience engagement. Where, I mean, it's so cool. It doesn't happen every episode, but I love it when we get people that come in and chat with us on the show. That's so awesome. And then after that, after you get that live engagement, which used to be very hard to do, because I remember working for a company that was attempting to do that back in 2005. And I mean, the technology just was not there. It was exceptionally difficult. You had people like on landlines calling in, and you had like special equipment to like try to get the landline to, like record or whatever. And nowadays it's like, well, let's just go live on YouTube. We'll get the people talking and get that cool community that we've talked about. And then after that, you rip that audio, you throw it up on a streaming service, and it goes live and sits there, and then people can listen to it, and you reach an entirely different audience. And so I feel like the idea for, and I don't want to speak for Artcasters because I'm just the rotating third chair, but at least for 48-hour Art Check, is we are in the new year, we are looking at completely changing everything over to kind of a live first, but with podcasting in mind, format, to where we are going to be doing a podcast and taking the best of the content that we talk about throughout that week, doing some slight edits to it, and then putting it up so that it can be listened to. And even this idea came from the viewers of that show. I mean, a lot of the people said, hey, have you ever considered making this a podcast? And at first I was just like, that just seems like so much work. And so actually for the last couple of weeks, I've been working on what it actually might take to do that and trying to streamline the process.
Yeah, and then I have been like just sitting back in awe at Cory's amazing skills. Like I feel kind of bad, because it's like, and this is something I also want to kind of reiterate about all of these shows. Like all of us like work full time, and or are freelancing full time. Like we're having to kind of pay bills with other sources outside of these shows. So like when we do these things, it's for love, and it's for and it's out of time that we have to kind of make. And so like to me, it's always fun collaborating with you, Cory, and especially on something like this where it's like we're barely collaborating. This is just you kind of being like, I have this idea, like, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, because I can't, and I kind of want to help, but at the same time, you are so like on point with just kind of making stuff that it's like done before I can even contribute. And I don't mean that as a negative. Like it's very helpful because, well, like once again, it's just one of those things. It's amazing and it's cool to see. And also just your technological savvy is just like way beyond what mine is when it comes to like streaming technology. Like you built that whole system we do the whole check on. But I do think like Scott, because I feel like we haven't had you in, man. But it's like I do think this is something we might want to consider for our show, and we can talk about the logistics of it. And maybe Cory can give us some tips, But I feel like our show, because of the length of it and because we usually have a special guest, and I think we keep the momentum moving pretty well, I think it would work pretty well in an audio format. Because there's not a lot of times where like we're literally like, and now I'm going to draw for dead silence. Yeah. Now I'm putting a line on an ear, like,
right.
But and I'm sure it's going to miss a little bit of the fun component of like being able to see what we're working on.
But that's the cool thing is you can in the audio you can always say because the way I'm doing it, if you guys want to preview like a sneak preview, it's not live yet, but you can go to corykerr.com/HR48. No, sorry, /48HR, so 48-hour art check. Then you can go there and see. But what you can do is you can say, here's the audio of this. If you want to see this full live episode, here it is. And so I'm showing both. And actually, Scott, one of the things that's really cool about this is it is built into Squarespace. So you already have everything you need to do a podcast. You just have to take one of your blogs, which you can create an infinite number of blogs in Squarespace, and tell it that it is now a podcast, and then submit it to iTunes. And all you have to do is every post that has an MP3 file in it will automatically be uploaded to iTunes without you doing anything.
Yeah. Well, okay, but here's a question, because I mean, Josh and I are a team. So if I put it on my website, how does that affect Josh? Or can he also put it on his, or is that diluting it? Or, it would be considered duplicate content if you both had the same exact thing. Right.
Yeah, you got to kind of pick a host, but I think like legally, regardless, if you're collaborating on content, like you're pretty much splitting the content. The tough part would be like, if we were to do it with ours and we wanted to start from like, the first one, obviously that would be a bit of a different story, because I think it all started with like Jeff, so, right. But like, I don't know I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I think that's kind of how it works, Yeah,
well, that's how it works from a copyright standpoint.
Yeah.
Is unless there's a written agreement, it's the creators, right? But one thing I'm hosting 48-hour art check on my Squarespace, but I don't own 48-hour art check. Josh and I made that together, and so he's in all of the credits and the metadata of every MP3 as one of the authors. And frankly, you don't even have to say this is on Sorkworks.com if you don't want to. It could be an unlisted blog so that nobody even knows where it's coming from. And then it could just totally exist in podcasting and nowhere else if you wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like coming from the standpoint of somebody who's like, been involved in podcasts and stuff, usually the only hub people are going to go to is like, like if your podcast grows in viewership or whatever, you make like a little landing page that people can go to. And that can be like the hub, but I don't think people are usually looking for like, what's the original IP this is generating from, but then again, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just not like, maybe everybody does do that. I don't know.
Right. So you were talking about doing this separately, doing the 48-hour art check separately. So will that now only live on there, or will it also live on your YouTube pages?
Josh and I haven't quite worked out the details on this, but my plan is, because of a bunch of the research that I've done, I think this will work the best, is that we will continue to go live on our channels. We'll continue to be live on Josh's channel and my channel and alternate. Then we're going to take those videos down and they edit a little bit of them, not much, because it's got to be doable. And if it takes any time at all, it won't be doable. And then I will re-upload those videos as an edited video on a 48-hour art check channel. And then I'll take that archived video basically and put that on Squarespace so that it gets published to the podcasting.
Although I kind of feel like with art check, that's kind of necessary, because I feel like with ours, I don't like. Here's the thing: would it be possible for us to just make like an audio file of the episode and just have that be the thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, in that case, I think if we were to do it, that would probably be the most effective. To just have an audio file that does the thing. And then like the neat thing is, it's kind of akin to what we were talking about with now I'm forgetting. But it was like, I guess this has to do with like what Cory and I were talking about the other day. But like we had somebody like asking us like about like what, and Scott, you and I have had like a similar discussion too. It's like a pretty common question where people are like, where do we print on demand? And ultimately our answer was just like, well, if you're starting out, you don't have like a massive fan base or anything. Like, and Scott, you and I have always harped on this too. It's like, try a bunch of different routes and then find what works for you for sales, But in a weird way, this kind of works in the same way. And I remember you saying that in regards to prints too, where you were like, well, you can try this and try this. And I think you were like talking about that with eBay too, where you were like, well, I'm going to try to build it. And if eBay ends up being you know what I mean? That's like, you kind of expand out. Well, I think with this, it's like the same kind of thought, just with like, if you do like a podcast and then let's say by chance the podcast blows up, then you can take that podcast and really build a little podcasting army. By the way, speaking of our chats, because they had been like, we have a lot of people watching, but they're like abnormally quiet today. So the other Scott's in the chats, and he said, seeing what you're working on is cool, but like you kind of mentioned, a lot of us already listen to these shows as a podcast. I'd say skip the editing and just convert YouTube to podcast. So
yeah, and I think
on that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and that's exactly what I'm doing, except for 48-hour art check, there's like 60 seconds of dead air at the beginning.
Yeah.
And, so I take that out, and then there's some explanation that needs to happen, and this is kind of the engagement. All I'm doing from an editing standpoint so far is I take that 60 seconds out, and then sometimes it takes us, a couple minutes of like fumbling around to even choose a topic, because sometimes we choose those live. But once we choose it, we get going and it's great. And so basically I just skip forward until we choose that. And I'm cheating, and I'll tell you how I'm cheating. If you can leave visual cues in there of when you need to make a cut audibly, it's really easy. So I just take that, I take that file, and the way I have OBS set up, I have it stream and record at the same time. So I drop that into Premiere or whatever video editor you have, and I scrub until I see this visual thing that I do when the topic starts, and then I just find that. And so it took me maybe 2 minutes to find where I needed to edit the front.
I love it.
And then at the end, there's slightly different calls to action that you would do on audio that don't make sense for video. Like I kind of do this anyway just because I'm paranoid, but I have to like spell things out because they can't see it.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so really in editing, it's a term called tops and tails where you're not touching the main content. You're just adjusting the tops and tails. And so ultimately, that's what Scott is saying is exactly what I'm planning on doing with some minor conversion to be an audio format.
Yeah. And I think one of the big reasons we were going to like actually just start kind of collecting all the videos on like one single YouTube channel is like kind of part of this experiment like we're doing with the thumbnails and stuff. We just think it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens out of that, because it's a lot easier to point people to one spot, you know, whereas I feel like, I don't know. Anyhow, I think that with Artcasters, I don't know. I kind of do think like just the audio alone and just kind of seeing how that does on iTunes particularly, you know, I think it would actually take off.
So here's kind of what I'm thinking. So what I would want to do probably moving forward if we decide to do this is kind of hone, because we kind of are flying by the seat of our pants, sort of.
Yeah.
So I would want to kind of nail down some sort of an intro that, you know, maybe it's scripted or something that we do all the time. Kind of like what I do with my video where I've got an intro that I do all the time, something like that. And maybe some sort of theme music short, you know, to like go into it. Yeah. So, and a way to close and a different way to close it out. I mean, we sort of have a thing we do, but it's not, it could be a little better. So there's that. Now, if I wanted to, because we were also talking about this, because we have so many episodes, if we were going to, how do we start it? Like, do we renumber? Do we do what? But if I decided just to start dumping, you know, the old episodes, starting with number 1, even though some of them may be, you know, out of date. I mean, we could even just put a little thing saying Artcasters from, you know, 3/21, 2016, or, you know, something like that. I don't know. So people understand this older. I don't know. I'm throwing things out there. But if we wanted to go back and put whatever theme music or whatever we wanted in those early episodes, how much work is that actually going to be? Because we have so many episodes. I don't know, you know.
So if you use something like an audio editors are mostly really simple.
Like GarageBand, you know.
GarageBand, Audacity, which is free both on PC and Mac. There's a few others. What you could do, and this wouldn't take too long, is you get your intro and outro recorded. Mm-hmm. You leave that in the file. You take the main clip for the episode. You push it in between those, export it, delete it, put the next episode in there, export it, delete it, put the next episode in there. So you could sit down for a couple hours and do a bunch of them.
So a perfect example is like when we used to do BIPT, like we were really we were trying to make like the most professional podcast we could. So we were like editing out we were putting in like bumpers everywhere, but we did have pre-recorded bumpers. So like before we go to like a mail section, when we were recording, we'd just be like, and now we're going to listen to listener mail. And then we had this pre-recorded bumper, just like Cory was describing, you know, we had like a file called bumpers, and it would have the intro, the extra, and the different segments. And you'd literally just edit it in. Now that would be a nightmare, like not a total nightmare, but it would be harder. But when you have like so much content and all you need is an intro and an extra, like that's pre-recorded, dude, like Cory's pretty dead on. Like making the intro and making the extra would be the hardest part. And then like you'd literally be able to just drop in, export. I mean, it would be, you know, a bit of work, but the cool thing is if you tried it like that, like I said, it's kind of an experiment. Dude, we have what? Like, I mean, how many have we done together, at this point? I can't even, I don't know. But I know it's probably over like 50 at least.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. You guys have a lot too, just because you do them so often. I mean, not as much as Artcasters, but still,
we're close to 70 at this point.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and are you uploading all of them? Are you doing all the old ones too, or?
No,
You probably don't need to because it's so
frequent. But also, Squarespace only will put up 100, and so if I get to 100, when I put up 101, that the oldest one will drop off. But something to consider, Scott, is you have the gear to be able to put that audio into it. And so if you did your Elgato switcher and loaded that with the intro, outro, whatever bumpers, little sound effects and segment things, you could do that live during the YouTube broadcast.
Well, yeah,
it would be part of the audio that you wouldn't even need to edit.
Yeah, we would want to do that moving forward, but like for the old stuff. But when you talk about Squarespace only lets you put up 100 episodes, I mean, I assume most of this, like, you've also got iTunes or whatever, right? So I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So the way that it works is iTunes will only take 100 episodes of an RSS feed from Squarespace. So Squarespace will house an infinite number of episodes, but only the most recent 100 will show up in the RSS feed that goes to iTunes.
But here's the thing, like, so let's say you get 100 episodes in, and you have a pretty big following, then you can like consider streaming it through another service, or you can consider just rerouting people to the Squarespace for the backlog, or what you do is like you have it available for subscription, and stuff like that, like a lot of podcasts do, where it's like, hey, if you want to get into the archives, like throw us $1 and you can listen to every episode. You know what I mean? So there's like, the point is, it's just a thought, but it's like, what do you lose? I mean, you're talking probably a day of like audio editing and uploading. Audio editing, and then just actually, okay, so here's what's being said in the chats. Like Nick Bernstein said, you should do a lot of the editing programmatically. I don't know, like I'm not that good at programming, but I do wonder if you could like make a shortcut that just literally, there you go. Nick also in the chat said archives are for Patreon. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's like a way that you generate, and we'd make like a Patreon this is just in theory, right? We're spitballing.
Right.
But it's like if we made a Patreon that was like Artcasters, that's a way to engage viewers. And the cool thing is you're not ripping people off, because you can say, or, you can feel free to watch these live on YouTube or go to our YouTube channels and follow like, our playlists and watch them that way. So like there's all sorts of possibility. But Nick was saying it would take like 2 hours to write a program to do it. So I wonder if you could just have like a shortcut where you just kind of grab the audio, hit the button, and it just imports it right between those two. Nick,
it sounds like we need to talk to Nick and maybe trade some art for some programming, because I don't know how to do that.
Dude, that sounds awesome. And then the other Scott, I'm going to just start calling him the other Scott in the chats. I'd rather be drawing, said, with an Artcasters podcast, just start from like episode 1 and post 2 a week. Think about that kind of regular posting. It would really work in your favor as far as building an audience. Regular posting hooks me into podcasts. See, the thinking is just, I'm not saying it would work, but it seems like kind of cool as a possibility, because I feel like we've made some really good content,
Yeah. There are a couple things that I'm thinking. So I like the idea of the old episodes being on Patreon. The only thing is I wouldn't want to pull them off of the YouTube channel. So, that's
what I mean. Yeah. You wouldn't have to. You just that's for the podcast listeners. So if they want to dig into the audio,
different audience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because let's see. Yeah.
Either way,
Comics Legend says he never listens to podcasts, and there are people that listen to podcasts. There's people that don't. So I mean, that would be there for both of them. So if I started, I like the idea of just starting to drop the old episodes on, so they get on iTunes. So maybe it starts building an audience, and then. So will those then just gradually drop off as new ones go once we get past 100, Cory? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just like there's only so much room on the table.
Right.
And as you add something, it pushes something off the edge of the table.
Okay.
But it doesn't delete it forever. It doesn't take it off your site. It just takes it off iTunes.
Right.
Correct.
But it'll stay. So you said Squarespace, I can put as much on there. Those won't go away. Just the iTunes feed will only get 100 of them, right?
Yeah, as long as you're paying the monthly fee for Squarespace, which I think at their basic paid level, you have like an infinite amount of storage and traffic.
Yeah.
You're just limited on some of the features that they offer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've got, or fortunately or unfortunately, I have the biggest plan just because that's the only one that would integrate Printful. So.
Right.
Man.
But that means that, unless they change their terms and service, you would be able to host as many episodes as you want.
Right. Okay.
There's a file size limit, but you're talking like an audio file that's 3 or 4 hours long to reach that limit.
I noticed
that.
Anything
under an hour and you're fine.
So Comics Legend was saying, I'm curious to know the number of viewers on video versus podcast, and So I think that the weird thing is there's a couple components to that, like having run a podcast that was kind of popular. We'd have upwards of 20 to 30,000, listens of a single episode. And we had we had thousands, and at some point I think tens of thousands of listeners. And the weird thing is, the most loyal people you can imagine. They were like an army. You would ask them to post on Twitter and just put #BIPT, and they'd do it because they liked the content, and I don't know, they just get engaged. And you'd ask them to leave a review on iTunes, and they'd do it. So it's weird because I feel like maybe I think the listeners are more engaged on podcasts.
It's more of a personal situation.
Yeah, because they're hanging out with you for an hour, or an hour and a half. So it's more similar to the audience we have now, who hang out and listen to Artcasters live,
right.
But it's that, multiplied by, all the people commuting who can't watch the video, and so here's the other thing that's cool about that 100 limit, right, Scott? Think about this. The one thing that doesn't go away from that are the reviews. So somebody listens to episode 1, they love it, they leave 5-star rating. That algorithm is being affected on iTunes by all your previous episodes, even if they're not available. So you build up that backlog, it stays for a really long time. It's hard to knock it down. And so that I don't know. I just feel I'm not saying we have to. I'm just saying when Cory brought it up, I was like, dude, that why not? I mean, the only thing for me, the big hesitation for me, as with any big engagement, is the time commitment. Because
that's my concern. I mean, I totally want to do it, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't know why I brought it up because why I didn't bring it up, but yeah, I totally want to do it. I just it's the amount of time, and if we can find a way to streamline it, I think a lot of it. I mean, I know Cory showed me how to do some of the stuff with the Stream Deck and everything, but I still haven't. I don't remember anything you told me, and we're gonna have to sit down and go over that again and figure it out, because there's another show we're talking about doing too, a YouTube show that involves that. But I'm not as technically savvy as Cory is. So
Scott, is this the show we were kind of thought was brilliant that you were talking about earlier?
Yes.
Oh, dude,
I'm still doing it. I've been wanting to do that for a while. It's just I've got to. Hopefully, depending on what happens with my work situation and everything, I'll have more time as long as I can get enough freelance work to justify, doing freelance and all this stuff free time. Hopefully I will have more time.
Yeah.
Assuming that I don't have to go find another full-time job.
Yeah. But, so one of my quick thoughts is like, if we were to try this out, I think the way to implement it would be like, maybe you and I, just start discussing like where would it start, because I think to me, like I would feel more comfortable if it started when I came on. You know what I mean? Because I just feel bad, like kind of posting like content like Jeff recorded or something like that.
Yeah, but again, I think.
Then again, you could talk to Jeff, and we could kind of make that work too. And I think Kevin would be for it.
To me, it's just a matter of I feel weird about this. Like it'd be weird if it just starts at a weird number. So. I don't think a lot of people are going to watch those old things. I think it's like one thing I always tell people that are starting YouTube is just when you're starting out, no one's paying attention. You don't have a lot of viewers. That gives you a chance to make mistakes or whatever. So it's kind of the same situation with this, where those are old episodes. They're probably not as, obviously they're not as topical. Some of that stuff is still good, but a lot of that stuff is probably not as topical. So I think if we just started putting.
We could start fresh.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, that's an option, I guess. But I was thinking if we just start putting those old episodes up there, and maybe we get a few people following or whatever, and they'll know that it's an old thing, but just kind of catch up. And like we were talking about, a lot of those are going to drop off, like as far as iTunes. So once we start uploading past that 100 episodes, all the episodes with Jeff aren't going to be on there anyway.
Well, we'd have to talk. We just have to make sure we talk to like Jeff and Kevin.
I definitely would do that. I don't think they would have an issue with it because I mean, it's just a matter of kind of like having that content just for the numbers, and maybe that's not so important.
No, I like it. I like it. So so that's worked out. So that's good. So that would be a good starting point. Is just like we'll talk to Jeff and Kevin, see how they feel about like us posting those. If they're cool with it, what you and I can do, like I can try to kind of, because I do have some audio experience, right? So I can try to kind of like you and I can collaborate, make a little bumper. For an intro, make a little bumper as a side project for an extra. And then what we'll do is just kind of like, here's what I think the best method of attack would be like, try seeing how fast one goes. And then if we can come up with a way to make it fast, then we literally edit all of them. Like, like through before we even go on iTunes, right? Then you have the whole arsenal. And you just start uploading, right? And then like, and by the time we're caught up, we'll see how it's doing on iTunes. What do you think?
We might have to get to a point where we're like uploading one or more. I don't know, one or more a day, I guess, just so we catch up. Because I don't want it to be. I don't want to. Because once we start this, we're probably not gonna upload those new episodes right away until we get those other ones up there. So it's going to take a while to catch up, Eventually we'll get to the point where as soon as we're recording, the day after or a couple days after they go up. But it's going to get a while till we get to that point,
I'd like it to make a recommendation that I think would work because I've seen several podcasts do this.
Okay.
Do both the new and the old at the same time. So Selected Shorts is a great podcast where they have actors and actresses read short stories, and they're very interesting. But they do it as a live show in New York. And what happens is they will go through and they will have like, here's the one that we recorded this week, and then 2 or 3 other times that week they'll be like, here's one from the past. And I think you guys could easily do like, Artcast retroactive or Artcasters, look into the past or something like that. And then people know like this is old content, but then they're also getting that week's content. So you could post like 3 to 5 times a week. One would be the new live show, and then the other 2 or 3 would be catching up on old episodes. And that way, if there's an episode that isn't relevant anymore, skip it. If there's an episode that you don't have to go in order, if there's an episode that isn't very good or whatever, skip it. But most of them are going to be great. And so, and you can kind of go in whatever order you want. You can also have themes. This week is going to be the week of, selling stuff online. And this week is going to be the week of, whatever. And then you could group them.
And Scott, also, like, this is the weird thing about podcast listeners, at least myself and like most people I know who like podcasts. Like, if I get really into a podcast and I'm listening to current episodes, one of my favorite things is to just dip back.
Yeah.
Because then I can it's like binge watching Netflix, except in the car driving. So it's like, it's not even taking away time. So I get to like consume like 3 years of a podcast in like 3 weeks, and then I'm so hooked that I'm like almost annoyed because then I have to wait for the weekly update, So think about that kind of audience. Like, they don't, like, a lot of podcast listeners aren't going to care if it's like current. They're going to get invested in the hosts and the drama, and that's where it kind of, and then the content's great too, but it's like, that's where what Cory's saying is great, because you get the content, like the current content, current updates, now, and then you could get like this whole beautiful backlog. So you're getting to kind of see how it started and see the current stuff at the same time. I just feel like to me, it's weird because we are sitting on 153 podcasts. And one of the hardest things for Kevin and I when we were doing BIPT back in the day was to organize. Streaming technology was terrible at the time. So we would do it together in the same room, which is always ideal anyway, but it was hard to organize and do all the logistics and then all the crazy editing. It's like, to me, just being in a position, like when Cory mentioned this, it's like, because we have like 70, I mean, they're 15-minute, short art checks, but it is one of those things where I was like, that is crazy, because it's a worthwhile experiment because we have enough content to where by the time we're caught up on YouTube and it's streaming on YouTube, it's a worthy experiment. You can see if you have a successful podcast and you didn't have to invest like the years of time into building it, and then seeing if it fails or succeeds. It's like literally just the content's there, man. Like, we have 153 episodes of content. Let's see what happens. Like, what happens when those 153 episodes are like on iTunes? Like, do we start getting iTunes rankings? Do people just ignore it? I don't know, but I'm really fascinated. And then if that happens, then on the current ones, we can start being like, dude, we're loving the iTunes audience. You guys like leave us 5-star reviews, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And or like trying to make something even more of it and letting it evolve. I don't know, but I at the same time, I have that same exact thing. Keeman said she'd been lurking and listening and forgot to greet us in the chats. Keeman, thanks for listening, and also thanks for joining in the chats. It's awesome. But you get what I'm saying? Like, I have the same worry because like we're both like super busy people. We're parents. We're like trying to juggle just keeping a roof over our heads. And we're both like crazy creative people who want to make a bunch of stuff. So it's like, do you really want to add another plate? And that's my biggest concern too. So I do think this would take a little bit of like strategizing to where we like, what's the minimum? Because part of why we've been able to do this is it's streaming and we're doing work while we're doing it,
Right.
So it would have to be that simple almost, where it's like it's live. There's not a ton of editing, and it's pretty quick. Because otherwise, like, I mean, otherwise, like, I don't know if we could, but I have to say, man, it is one of those things. When Cory brought it up, was like, that's a good idea. I've been thinking about that for Artcasters. I've been thinking about that for us. It's just been in the back of my head. And it sounds like it was in the back of yours too, which makes me think maybe we should do this.
Yeah. And I think once we get the new ones, like I think we can do it so it's not going to be that complicated once we do some setup. But I think it's more all those, whatever we do with like the back episodes, getting those up or whatever whatever we do with that. I kind of like Cory's idea, but I still, to me, like, it's also like the numbering thing, because there's so I listen to Stuff You Should Know, and they do something where they do Stuff You Should Know Selects, where it's kind of the same thing, where they pick an older episode and they just upload it, one that was good that somebody might have missed. So I kind of see that, like, you know, but and before that they'll do a little intro. This is stuff you should know from back, and they give the date and everything. So I mean, we could do something like that too, but that doesn't
like no, like, because right there it's already way more complicated than it is. It's just you know, you have you know, we have our bumper. It's rad. It's got like music, and it's like Artcasters, the weekly art show, you know, hosted between, you know, and we say the hosts because those do change throughout the you know, the episodes. And you say the hosts, and then you say, like, you know, the links, like follow our work, blah blah blah, and now the show, or what, you know what I mean? Like the very brief, short, like intro, like get people pumped, and then it gets into the content. And if the early content's weak, that's the way podcasts go anyway. Like early podcasts, people are figuring it out. They have no idea what they're doing. It's going to get better and better and better. So that's another part of me that's like, we're sitting on 153 podcast episodes, you know?
Right.
And like our listeners are all artists. All the people in our chats are artists. It's not going to take away their ability to talk to us in the chats. It's just going to extend to more artists out there who want to like listen to people working on art and just talking shop while they're working on art, you know? And
it could drive more traffic to YouTube too, because sometimes people might say, oh, I'm curious, these guys are talking to people on the chat, how do I get on that? Or how do I sometimes they may, we don't do it a lot, but sometimes we might reference something we're working on screen. But that's kind of a good thing that we don't do a lot of that too, because that would make it harder to be a podcast.
And then you build that into the extra, right? Like the exit is like, you know, you may have heard some weird stuff where you couldn't see what was being talked about.
Right.
Watch the live stream, you know, to know where the live stream is, join, and you do the mailing list thing. Yeah. And then boom, you've got like that, and then it's you know, it's a potential. I think it's I don't know, I think it's exciting.
I like the idea of having sort of a pre-recorded intro and outro too, with whatever whatever, because we do that live, and it's kind of, and we don't really have it down so much. So and that way we don't have to worry about it. We do it once, and then we can kind of jump into, but we can talk more about this. I mean, we might eventually, I think we might have to like wrap up this episode. We might have to just hash some of this stuff out afterwards. But
and I don't, like, by no means do I think this is gonna like start next week or anything.
No,
I think it's great content, and like I actually think where this is good content for you know, our friends and stuff in the chats is like, this is how like ideas get started. This is how BIPT got started back in the day. It was literally Kevin and I just troubleshooting and being like, I don't know, man, like there's no podcast about illustration. I don't really know how to do podcasts. Let's figure it out, you know? Could we do that? And then just kind of, you start working the logistics. If the idea is good enough, it's going to kind of stick around. You know, so you guys like who are listening or watching, you'll know if like, you know, a month from now, you start noticing Artcasters just suddenly appearing on iTunes, you know? If you don't see that happen, then maybe we were like, you know, we talk about this and we're like, yeah, it's another plate, you know, because we've also had multiple episodes on that where it's like, you know, you got to kind of pick your targets and really focus your guns on them, because you can end up extending yourself too thin, you know? So, but I do think, I really think we can make it work. But Cory, do you think we're crazy? I mean, well, you seem to be advocating for it too, but like, do you think there's a way we can kind of streamline it where it won't be like crazy addition beyond what we're talking about? I mean, I think,
go ahead. I actually, and I'm wondering if I should talk to Mick, but I would be willing to pay for someone to do this, because I haven't been able to find something, but I actually think that there's an opportunity for somebody to write a program, and that program would take a YouTube feed and turn it into MP3s, because that's the most time consuming part. And it's actually not that bad. There's a couple programs out there that will rip it for you off of YouTube. And then there's the editing. I mean, it's definitely not, it's not going to be nothing as far as a time thing, but it's not going to be creating new content. And it's, once you get everything set up, see, in my life, everything I've done has kind of fallen into this category of, I start and I spend an inordinately large amount of time trying to figure out how to automate as much as I possibly can. And then once it goes, and I mean, this is like coloring, this is everything that I do, even to the point of like the 48-hour art check. I spent a huge amount of time those first 2 weeks before we went live, doing all kinds of experimentation and in animation and different things. And I went live multiple times privately just to test everything out. But now, we just go, okay, yeah, let's do it, and then we're up and running. And it's because we're putting the work at the beginning. So I think at the beginning there's going to be some learning, and stuff like that. We might get some people involved, to help on a programmatic side. But once it's going, it's not going to add much more time. It'll add a little bit, but I don't think it'll be a huge amount of time. Having said that, I've never done it. But I mean, like I did 2 episodes today in about 20 minutes. And that's insane. Me. And that's me not knowing what was going on.
Contrast that with like Kevin and I on BOPT, we would spend sometimes a couple days, sometimes like a whole week, like editing like one episode.
Right.
Yeah, but that was very I don't know the acronym. Big Illustration Party Time was very, I mean, you had all kinds of sound effects and stuff. And I mean, we may even be able to throw some of those in there if it's just on the stream, if it's just something we hit, at the time or whatever.
Yeah.
But
and that would be,
it would have to be a live thing,
Yeah. I mean, that would be the ideal, right? But like, I feel like we have 153 episodes that, like, if we just put a bumper at the beginning and the end and just kind of let it be what it is and see, like, I don't know, does this have legs?
Yeah.
It's kind of like being a band and just putting out a demo. It's like, it doesn't have to be like a perfect album, like for your first album. It's like, I don't know, let's see if people like these tracks. If they like them, like, then we can like really pin it down. And also, if it starts taking off, then we can start formatting this more, just being coherent, that like when it's edited, even if we don't have a live bumper, when we do it live, we could still kind of be aware that like when this is edited down, there's going to be an intro. So we can make our intros really brief, like way shorter, so I don't know. It's just
and also, Scott, you have mentioned a couple times now that you've forgotten what I've showed you and whatever on the different things. I've been meaning to for months now, and I've just been super busy. Make a video. Part of what I want to do for the 48-hour art check is I want a bunch of other people on there. I want a bunch of other people doing it. We've got some people that are doing it weekly.
Yeah.
And that's great. And we're going to build a house online that hopefully will drive traffic to everyone doing the 48-hour art check, not just Josh and I. But part of that is I am going to start doing some instructional videos on how to do it. Like, here's how I do this, and here's a kit that you can download that will work with an Elgato stream and whatever. And one of those videos, I think it might be good to sit down with you, is I just want to explain what my setup is. Because I actually think, I didn't come up with it, but I have altered it to the point where it's pretty inventive. I've come up with something that I think is actually pretty unique in the way that it's done. And I'd like to show people how to do that. And so if you want to sit down on Illo Talk one of these times, we could do a live stream, and I'll just show you and talk through my setup on the 48-hour art check. And most of that would translate over into, whatever you want to do in Artcasters and what you want to do in that secret project that you don't want to mention yet. That's going to take the world by storm and be freaking amazing.
It will. Like if logistically, I think the setup's going to take a lot longer than even 48-hour art check. But I think if we can make that thing work, like,
oh my gosh,
we're gonna have
it's such a good idea.
Not only just like a great thing that people can watch, but it'll be like the most fun thing. Like, I will be begging you to be on it every.
The thing that I worry about is that if I launch that thing, it's probably going to be a thing that may get tons of views and maybe the only thing people want to see, and then it comes down to, oh, your channel needs to be just that, which I don't want it to be just that. But
do it on its own channel.
Yeah, but then it's kind of weird because then you're starting from scratch where I already have some of an audience, so that's just difficult.
I think it's fine. I do agree with Roberto Blake that variety shows are hard, but at the same time, look at Nerdist. Look at a lot of those. They've got a bunch of different shows on the same channel. College humor, stuff like that. So it's general advice isn't always completely applicable to everything, and so I think it'll be fine. It's not like your show is about art, and then all of a sudden you're going to start talking about car repair or something. It's still related to the audience that's there.
Yeah.
I also have a suspicion you're going to really enjoy it because it sounds so fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, anyhow, we got to stop teasing people about that one because it is kind of one of those things of like, man, that joke was really good by that comedian. You should have seen it. But
you had to be there.
Yeah, you had to be there. You know what was crazy when that one thing happened? Yeah, it was great. I don't know. Anyhow, I love this kind of thing. And I guess to like just tie this back to like people who are listening and stuff. It's like, to me, like that, like one of the things I love about Artcasters, like doing this every week, I love about Art Check is like we found a way to like hang out, talk art, kind of, connect to like a community and make it fairly effortless, like not super effortless because it requires a little commitment. But it's like, I love that and I want to see that grow. It's like part of why we're even thinking about like isolating the 488-hour Art Check to one hub is also to like highlight that community, because we're going to eventually have like that somehow integrated in there. We're kind of working all that out. But it's like the idea, because it's such a fun thing. And part of it, the reason we're even doing it is to give each other fuel to like get this stuff done. Because, it's super discouraging, working on art. It's discouraging working as a professional artist because it's up and down. It's feast and famine. And so it's like the more you kind of build like people around you are like in the same fight, it's like the more fuel you get, and it's like it's kind of like being at like a vid summit or like Adobe Max like every week, because you're like getting to be surrounded by that every week. And so I don't know, like I want that fuel, and part of like why I really like the idea of possibly, I mean, just this toying idea of iTunes is there's a whole world of people who are like fired up about art, who are at their art tables really late at night, and they need Artcasters in their ears, and we're like on YouTube, and they just can't even find us on iTunes. They're looking for like that next, because I've been that guy. Like I especially when I was like freelance, like full time, man. Like I was just like hunting for like the next podcast, like because I just caught up on everything on this one that I obsessively listened to all day, and like the joy and the cool connection you feel when you find a new one, like that could be us, And I'm like, I don't know, that's what I like about it, I don't know if it's feasible yet, but I love this process of the creative process. It's the best part, where it's like, hey, we haven't done the work yet. Let's play and kind of see what would this look like.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to kind of put a pin in it there then? And because I mean,
I think we've got an opportunity here where we've got a super awesome group of people in the chat. I'd like to poll everybody. I'm kind of curious if you are listening and in the chat right now. Let me point the camera at my face rather than at my knee. I'm super curious on your thoughts. Give me a thumbs up if you think it's a good idea, and also I'd be interested in how many of you would listen to the podcast after the fact. And so if that's the case, just give me a thumbs up for I think it's a good idea. Give me like a smiley face emoji or something if you would actually listen. I'm just kind of curious on what everybody thinks, because I know this is the marketer in me, but we have an opportunity here to kind of ask our audience what they think. And anyway, yeah, so we're getting Gazbot is doing a thumbs up. Gaz is a good example of somebody who he's producing a ton of content, and at one point in time was doing the 168 and all that. And so anyway,
yeah, Keeman just gave a thumbs up. Oh, I do want to give people who are like way against it an option too, because I want to give people an option. So give it a thumbs down if you don't like it. Yeah,
if you think it's a stupid idea, or if you think it would somehow tarnish the brand or something, or because there is kind of like an exclusivity to both of these situations that we've been talking about.
Yeah, like are we like being the kids in the clubhouse in the treehouse that had a sign that was like only comic artists, and then now we're letting in the jock or something, like what anyhow, and it, so we're getting some feedback in the chats. I think if you guys are watching,
also in the description or the comments after you're watching this after the fact, let us know, leave a comment. But not every, again, this is sort of the people that are watching us on YouTube, they're already a fan, they're already YouTube watchers. So they may just continue to watch that. So that might not be the best. I mean, every bit of information is helpful, but that might not be the,
And here's the thing I'll say for those people too, is like everybody in our community, like I don't know, man, it makes my week every week to like have this hangout and feel like I'm hanging out with artists all over the world, and that you guys are kind of like, I don't know, it's just like a big hangout, and I love it. That definitely won't change if we do this thing. Like that would actually, like all that would do is maybe a couple more people would like join in our hangout, and like, so to me, like that's kind of the benefit too, is like, the catch is it wouldn't really change much about the content, except that it would just, make it available to more people, which I think is kind of rad.
Yeah.
Oh, and Nick was saying, I can't imagine, and Nick Bernstein, he was saying he doesn't commute, so he's like not the market, but he can't imagine why we wouldn't do it. And he's like, and worst case scenario, you do, it sucks, delete it. And that's always a good point. Like, like, a lot of people when they start their first comics and stuff are just like freaked out about like, what if I draw the wrong page? Then you like start over or redraw it, like you make another comic, it's like, that, yeah. So I'm kind of, I don't know, but I love this thought. I love this kind of moment. I don't know. But as you can tell, like we're all kind of people who we probably do this too often with too many projects.
Well, that's why I think kind of like automating as much as you possibly can. And then one of the things that VidSummit that was super fascinating is they said with minor tweaks, you can repurpose your content in drastic ways. So for example, if you're doing something that would preclude you from being able to like cut it up well, and you just reorganize like where that happens, it's the same exact content, but you just, like this guy was saying, plan in pauses.
Yeah.
He said like, do your intro and then take a breath. And just doing that alone will allow you to take that content and cut it up and put it on Facebook and cut it up and put it on Instagram and cut it up and put it on a podcast and do whatever, just by taking a breath in between segments, because that gives you an opportunity to edit well. And so I think there's just the big thing, the big takeaway for me from this VidSummit to kind of bring this full circle was don't burn everything you have to the ground and start from scratch, but what minor changes can you make? What little tweaks can you do that will kind of take the whole thing, and bring it to the next level? And that's like, a little tweak to how I was doing my thumbnails. We'll see in a month or two if that really has an effect, because most things that you do take 28 days to to really like kick in.
Yeah, especially zombie apocalypses. They tend to take about like 28. Sorry.
It grows a little bit, but from patient zero to no. But yeah, so I mean, but these little minor tweaks, and so with like Artcasters and 48-hour art check and other things, a lot of the stuff that the people are in the chat are doing. Are there little minor tweaks that you could do that would make it so that that content can be repurposed quickly, easily, without adding a ton of time, and help you build your audience, or help you build your revenue stream, or help you sell more shirts or whatever, without sullying or starting from scratch or denigrating what's kind of going on already. Those tweaks. And if you think that through from a programmatic standpoint, a little change will help a lot. And so that's kind of like the biggest thing. And then I think Nick is on point. If it sucks, just, delete it and do something else. So.
Yeah. And I mean, like the key thing, I think the reason I even think this is even worth thinking about for either of these projects is these are both projects I enjoy doing. Like, they're fun to do, if they weren't fun to do, then like, is one of those things of like, well, I don't know what, but they're fun to do. So why not kind of give them some legs? And I don't know. I love it. Scott, do you have any kind of final thoughts before we kind of wrap it up?
No. I mean, there's still a lot to discuss, but I mean, I don't think we have to do it all here right now. So
no, it has to happen here. We're having a decision. No, I'm just kidding.
Up all night.
It'll like flash forward to the 5-hour video. So thank you for everybody who joined in the chats. It's fun to have such a like lively group of people. And yeah, if you guys have any like suggestions, if you guys like would want to help us make this happen, like Nick was mentioning, he's really good at programming. Like, I don't know, dude, do you have like an hour? If there's somebody who knows how we could do that really easily, dude, reach out to us, let us know. Anyhow, thanks to everybody in the chats, because you guys kind of make this thing fun and always make these better, because we're interesting on our own, but not that interesting. But when we have great guests like Cory, it was awesome having you on. And when we have engagement in the chats, it's always a good show, always a fun hangout. So that said, you guys know where to find me. And like I said, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe, hit that bell so you know when new videos are up. And you can watch this show. You can watch the 48-hour art check every other week. And if you want to see like this weird thing that's taking me way too long to start drafting out in its finality, you can probably see it on Instagram just by looking for my name. So where can people find your stuff, Cory?
So you can find me at corykerr.com, and subscribe on YouTube. If you guys are interested in what I was working on today, this has been kind of what I've been doing for Inktober, and you can see kind of the progression of this. I've been posting it to Instagram, and so you can see that on my Instagram, and I would love a little bit more action on Instagram. It's a little slow based on that, but if any comments or anything that you guys have got, that'll help that algorithm. So, but yeah, I'm live with Josh every other day, 3 times a week. So subscribe to his channel and my channel, and hang out with us, because we do that usually 9 p.m. California time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's kind of about when we go live.
Word. And then Scott, where can we find your work? And then where can people how can they keep track of this crazy show that keeps bouncing from our channels? It's just hard. I've hit the bell, but it doesn't notify me. What do I do?
Okay, I'll get to that in a minute after I give a quick plug. So yeah, you can find my stuff at cerkworks.com, SERKWORKS. New stuff on the website. I'm also doing Inktober. You can find that on, I think I'm posting it to most of my social media, other than YouTube, but primarily Instagram. I'm at cerkworks pretty much everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So that's where you can find me. And as far as this show, like Josh was saying, it's kind of, sometimes it's on different days, sometimes it's at different times. Well, usually the same time, different days. but different channels. But if you want to know exactly where we're going to be, the best way to figure that out is to join our mailing list. And we don't spam you or anything like that. We just like to let you know, hopefully about 30 minutes ahead of time. We'll just send out a newsletter. And if you want to join that, there is a link in the description of this video. And yeah, so I don't know if I'm turning it back to Josh, or if you just want me to, again, give kind of a shout out to the chat. Go ahead.
Can I point out that Scott is wearing a T-shirt that I designed?
Yeah. So if you want to get a cool T-shirt that says "Make Art" or "Market," you can get that from Cory's store.
Oh my gosh! See, if we're doing peddling art, like now, I want to ask Scott. I want to get Cory's shirt, but I also I'd love to know where to get a lot of shirts of your designs. Like, where could I get those at?
You can get those at circworks.com. There's actually two stores. There's one, if you just go to store, you'll be able to find shirts and all that kind of stuff. And then I have a kind of a separate store that's the digital products, and that's just if you click the download link on my store, or downloads, you can get some cool digital stuff. But yeah, the T-shirts are just at the store link on circworks.com.
I love it, and that's the brand new refreshed site that you guys should all check out, because it is really cool, and it's making me want to switch to Circworks because I feel like the old dinosaur on WordPress now. All right, thank you guys again, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Later.